philosophy, which is non-violent resistance, which has guided and which has undergirded our movement all of these years in the South and over the nation. First, I am convinced that this method is the strongest method available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom and human dignity. I'm absolutely convinced that if the Negro succumbs to the temptation of using violence in his struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness, and our chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos. But that is another way, and it is this way of nonviolent resistance. And this method has a way of disarming the opponent. It exposes his moral defenses, it weakens his morale, and at the same time, it works on his conscience, and he just doesn't know how to handle it. If he doesn't beat you, wonderful. If he beats you, you develop the quiet courage of accepting blows without retaliating. If he doesn't put you in jail, wonderful. Nobody within a sense loves to go to jail. But if he puts you in jail, you go in that jail and transform it from a dungeon of shame to a haven of freedom and human dignity. Even if he tries to kill you, you develop the inner conviction that there are some things so dear, some things so precious, some things so eternally true that they are worth dying for. And if a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live. The nonviolent movement gives an individual the capacity to stand up against an evil, unjust system without violence, without hatred in his heart, but willing to risk even his life in order to give witness to the truth as he sees it. Another thing about this method is that it makes it possible for you to struggle and yet maintain an attitude of active goodwill toward the perpetrators of the old order. I guess this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the nonviolent discipline when it goes over to the area of talking about loving people. People ask me all the time, what in the world do you mean when you say love these people who are oppressing you? And I always have to stop and say, try to give the meaning of love in this context. It would be nonsense to urge oppressed people to love their violent oppressors in an affectionate sense. That would be nonsense. Fortunately, the Greek language comes to our aid here. There are three words in Greek for love. One is the word eros. Eros is a sort of aesthetic love. Plato talked about it a great deal in his dialogues, a yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. It has come to us to be a sort of romantic love. And so we all know about this. We've experienced it and read about it in all of the beauties of literature. In a sense, Edgar Allan Poe was talking about eros when he talked about his beautiful Annabel Lee with the love surrounded by the halo of eternity. In a sense, Shakespeare was talking about eros when he said, love is not love which alters when it alteration finds or bends with the remover to remove. It is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark. You know, I can remember that because I used to quote it to my wife when we were courting. That's eros. The Greek language talks about phileo, which is another level of love. It's a sort of intimate affection between personal friends. It's a reciprocal love. On this level, you love people that you like. You love because you are loved. This is friendship. And then the Greek language comes out with another word. It is a word agape. Agape is more than romantic or aesthetic love. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. And when one rises to love on this level, he loves every man. And even though he has on the basis of that love to stand up against the evils which have been structured in society, even though he will have to demonstrate, he will have to boycott, he will have to sit in, he will have to march, he will have to picket, he looks in the face of his most violent opponent. And he says he is that way because he was taught that. For generations his parents taught him, even his church taught him that, his schools taught him that, his culture taught him that. and somehow you look into his face and you seek to tear down the unjust system while maintaining an active attitude of goodwill toward the perpetrator of that unjust system, you rise to the level of loving the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does. And I believe it is this kind of love which will lead us out of this dark night of racial injustice to a brighter day of brotherhood. Somehow in our most difficult moments, at times we've been able to rise up to the essence of nonviolence. We've been able to look into the eyes of our most violent opponents and say in substance, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you. We cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. So throw us in jail, and we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities at the midnight hour and drag us out on some wayside road and beat us and leave us half dead. And as difficult as it is, we will still love you. Threaten our children and bomb our homes, and we will still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And one day we will win our freedom. But we will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and your conscience that we will win you in the process. And our victory will be a double victory. This is the meaning of nonviolence. And when we grasp it, we will not seek to rise from a position of disadvantage to one of advantage, thereby subverting justice. We will not substitute one tyranny for another, but we will know that a doctrine of black supremacy is as dangerous and evil as a doctrine of white supremacy, and that ultimately God is not interested merely in the freedom of black men and brown men and yellow men, but God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race and the creation of a society where all men will live together as brothers and every man will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. And with this philosophy, I believe that we can go this additional distance, working hard, mobilizing our forces. And may I say to you that there is still a need for more people to become actively involved in the movement. I would urge all men of goodwill to become involved participants rather than detached spectators. This summer, we will be working all across the South. In my organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we have what is known as the SCOPE Project, the Summer Community Organization and Political Education Project. After the Civil Rights Bill, the voting bill, is passed, it will be necessary to get Negroes registered to vote by the thousands. And I believe in 10 weeks through our SCOPE project, we can double the number of Negro registered voters in the Black Belt South. And we are asking at least 2,000 students from Northern and Western and other universities over our nation to join us and come into these communities. We will be working in 120 counties. And we will be working in these Black Belt counties to get Negroes registered and to get the kind of political education going that will bring the awareness and the determination to register. It seems to me that this is a noble task that any student that participate in. We must have a sort of domestic freedom corps. And by the thousands, students and faculty members will continue to come into the Deep South and aid us in the struggle. In short, that is still a great deal of work to be done. And as I said, no community can boast of clean hands in this area, and this problem will not be solved until we develop a sort of divine discontent all over America. There are certain technical words within every academic discipline which soon become stereotypes and cliches. Every academic discipline has its technical nomenclature. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. And certainly we all want to live the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But I must honestly say to you this afternoon, my friends, there are some things within our world and our nation of which I'm proud to be maladjusted, of which I call upon all people of goodwill to be maladjusted until the good society is realized. I must honestly say that I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intend to become adjusted to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. But I recognize that there are between 40 and 50 million of our brothers and sisters in this country who are perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. And I will never adjust myself to these conditions. I will never be satisfied until all of God's children will have the basic necessities of life. I must honestly say that I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. But in a day when Sputniks and explorers are dashing through outer space and guided ballistic missiles are carving highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can win a war. It is no longer a choice between violence and non-violence. It is either non-violence or non-existence. And the alternative to disarmament, the alternative to a greater suspension of nuclear tests, the alternative to strengthening the United Nations and thereby disarming the whole world may well be a civilization plunged into the abyss of annihilation. And so maybe we need a new organization in our world, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment, men and women who will be as maladjusted men and women who will be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day could cry out in words that echo across the centuries, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." As maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not survive half slave and half free. As maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery, could etch across the pages of history words lifted to cosmic proportions. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As maladjusted as Jesus of Nazareth, who could say to the men and women of his day, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that despitefully use you." And through such maladjustment, we will be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. May I say to you in conclusion that I believe we will go that additional distance. I still have faith in America, and I still believe that even though we have some more difficult days in Alabama and Mississippi and all over, that somehow this problem can and will be solved. That we are mobilizing forces, and we have a coalition of conscience and a grand alliance now that will bring an end to the injustices that have been with us for so long. I still have the faith to believe that we shall overcome before the victory is won. Some more will get scarred up a bit. Before the victory is won, some more will be thrown into jail. Before the victory is won, many will be misunderstood and called bad names simply because they are determined to stand up. Before the victory is won, maybe somebody else, like a Mrs. Lutz or a Reverend James Reeb or Jimmy Lee Jackson, may have to face physical death. But if physical death is the price that some must pay to free their children and their white brothers from an eternal death of the spirit, then nothing can be more redemptive. Yes, we shall overcome. And I have faith in the future, because I know somehow that although the arc of the moral universe is long, it bends toward justice. That is something in this universe which justifies Carlyle in saying, no lie will live forever. That is something in this universe that justifies William Cullen Bryant in saying, truth-crushed earth will rise again. Yes, we shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands all over this nation and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you.